Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Dr. Stephen Rogelberg. Stephen is the Chancellor's Professor at UNC Charlotte and has been recognized as the world's leading expert in improving meetings, something we all could benefit from. His award-winning work has appeared in leading academic journals as well as in the popular press, in outlets like the Wall Street Journal, the New York Times, Bloomberg, CNN, CBS, and the BBC, just to name a few. And he's consulted for companies like Google, Facebook, Amazon, Pfizer, and Cisco, has testified before the US Congress on ways to improve workplace culture, and is the author of two outstanding books, The Surprising Science of Meetings, and his latest, which just dropped this week, Glad We Met, The Art and Science of One-on-One Meetings. Stephen, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much. I always get a kick, when in the introduction, when people say, yeah, I testified to Congress, because clearly I didn't fix anything, right?
And he didn't do anything wrong, right? He wasn't hauled before Congress by an oversight committee, folks. Just
I was trying to give them advice and counsel to be a more effective body. How do you think that turned out?
We can still hope. Hopefully we can fix meetings, at least in the short time we have together today. What do you wish more people knew, especially about these one-on-ones?
Just how important they are. The best managers recognize that one-on-ones are not an add-on to the role. Conducting one-on-ones successfully are foundational to being a manager. In many regards, these one-on-ones are where leadership really happens in a deep and meaningful way.
Mm-hmm. I guess given their current form, though, I'm not quite sure who dreads these more, whether it's the manager or the team member. I've heard them call different things, from one and done to one and run. What are we getting wrong here?
So much. I mean, because our research shows that when these one-on-ones are going well, and they're effective, employees want more and more and more and more. So the disdain for them is not because of the underlying nature of these one-on-ones. It's just that managers are not executing effectively. And it's really not much of a surprise. I have found only one organization that provided any training to managers on how to do one-on-ones. Pretty crazy.
You're looking at hundreds of organizations.
Oh, thousands.
Thousands. And only one
provides training on how to do one-on-ones.
Can you tell us who that is?
No.
Okay.
So you don't have training. At the same time, our research is pretty clear that managers think they're better at it than the directs. So there's a little bit of a blind spot. And that blind spot is highly problematic, because when you think you're good at something, you're not motivated to make changes. So basically, managers just keep recycling the dysfunctional practices that they themselves have experienced.
Yeah, so they're perpetuating bad practices, things that they know or think to be good and true when really they're totally not.
Exactly.
Yeah. So you maintain that the best one-on-ones are not manager focused. They're not focused on what the manager needs. They're focused on what the employee deserves and really wants. Tell us more about that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, these are meetings orchestrated by the manager, but for the direct. While successful one-on-ones address the tactical and practical needs around getting work done effectively, there's so much more. I mean, these meetings fundamentally influence a direct report's experience at work, their experience of their manager, including how they engage and attach to the role and even envision their future in the organization. So these one-on-ones have the potential to be transformative to directs. And what a nice piece of evidence on this is, there was some data reported that asked employees, how many of these one-on-ones would they ideally want? And you would think that people who are more junior to leadership, so first-line folks or even just frontline workers, that they would want the most, right? Because they're new, they're more junior in their careers. But that's not the case. The research actually shows that the more senior leaders were even more desirous of one-on-ones. And I think this speaks to the recognition from these individuals that these one-on-ones can truly be incredibly positively impactful. Having this time where you can sit down with your manager and broach issues and challenges, get advice and counsel, ask for support. I mean, these are such amazing moments. In so many ways, these one-on-ones serve as the opportunity for the employee to be truly seen, right? As a person, as an individual, right? So when a manager is in front of a room, a team meeting, that's a different experience. But when you're one-on-one with that person and that person is truly listening, asking great questions, taking an interest in what's on your mind, that's an incredible feeling. And when a manager does that well, everything is elevated. In fact, the data is pretty convincing that not only do excellent one-on-ones elevate employee performance, right? But as employees thrive, it's also associated with team success. And anytime your team or your people are successful, that's a reflection on you as a manager. So it's a small investment of time that pays dividends. And I would probably kind of wrap it up. This is the one meeting that should never be an email.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a virtuous cycle. It's good for the manager. It's good for the employee. It's good for the team. But I imagine that the details really do matter. So let's talk tactics. Help us sequence this for our leaders out there who want to have better one-on-ones with their directs. What do they do both before and I guess during to make these meetings more impactful in the way that you're describing?
Sure. So obviously we have limited time, and the book gets really deep into this. That's really what's so exciting about the book is it lays out just a whole bunch of evidence-based options for the manager to consider. It's not prescriptive. It doesn't say do X, then Y, then Z, because it doesn't work that way. But what I wanted to do was share options that are grounded and then provide the context so that the manager then can shape it to fit their situation, which is why I called the book The Art and Science of One-on-Ones. So for our conversation, though, let me share two common mistakes that managers make. And then if you'd like, we could even switch perspectives and talk about some things directs should do as well. But I'll just give you some taste. And hopefully this taste will be so delicious that you'll want to explore more by checking out my website in the book. All right, sound fair?
That in the show notes.
All right, awesome. So, one thing when the manager's running these things, the key is talking less, listening more. Talk less, listen more. So the biggest predictor of one-on-one value I found in my research is the direct's active participation, as measured by the amount of time they talk relative to the manager. So stated differently, the biggest predictor of ineffectiveness was the manager talking more than the direct. So the best managers avoid talking and keep asking questions actively and in an engaging way, so the direct keeps talking. But this is actually more difficult than we realize, as talking a lot appears to fire up the same areas of the brain as sex and good food. So we talk a lot because it feels good, but we need to resist that temptation and give that to the employee. As part of this, the manager needs to constantly, look for opportunities to encourage the direct to share their thoughts on how to solve some of the problems that maybe they've brought forward. But even this is more challenging because, there's this managerial tendency that when you hear someone else's idea, if it doesn't match yours exactly, we might push back. So to make these meetings work, the manager really has to pick their battles. Unless there's a really meaningful and big gap between their ideas and yours, just go with theirs. If it's meaningful, obviously you can have that conversation, but heck, you don't know if you're 100% right. So, and if the employee, turns out not to be fully right, well, you can coach around that and talk about that, but this is how they grow and develop. And this communicates respect and trust. Another key tip is thinking carefully about the cadence of these things. The science is most aligned with a weekly or every other week cadence, to maximize the positive benefits. So a monthly cadence just doesn't seem to yield the strong returns. Can it still work? Kind of, yes, not really, but basically when you have one-on-ones more sporadic than every week or other week, you get a recency bias, right? We wind up just talking about the things that immediately happened, and that's just not useful, right? We want to make sure that these things really reflect the constellation of broader issues. And also by having a more frequent cadence, you build momentum. And, it's just the value is just greatly enhanced. So managers having a regular cadence, listening, encouraging the direct to talk, creating threads from past one-on-ones, asking good questions, not falling into the status update trap. These are all things that help the manager elevate these one-on-ones.
Did your research uncover any helpful guidance on how long these meetings should last for? Because I imagine for our leaders out there who are managing larger teams, finding that time is going to be really sacred and stressful. So
Sure.
What's the sweet spot?
There isn't a sweet spot per se. Which is, in some regards, good news, because even a regular cadence of just 15 or 20 minutes, if executed effectively, can absolutely work. But, I'll add that, someone might get bogged down, like, oh, how am I going to find this time? But you save time. You save time because your folks are thriving. They're doing better. And you also save time because if people know they have these regular meetings with you, well, they're not just constantly interrupting you throughout the day, right? Because they know they get this special time. And so as your people thrive and, get this better direction and you decrease these interruptions, you're reclaiming that small investment.
Yeah. So it's spend now to save later.
Love that.
Yeah. So how do we know how these meetings are going? I imagine measuring for their meaning is going to be super important to build out that confidence, both for the manager and for the direct, that there's actually something productive happening here. How do you know?
Love it. So as I mentioned earlier, managers' self-ratings of their skills in conducting one-on-ones appears inflated. They think they're better at them than what their directs say. And obviously that's problematic. And then, obviously, given that there's the overall ratings of one-on-ones not being optimal, which is around 50%, that's also problematic. So, basically this managerial blind spot is an issue. So the best way to address this is we need to provide feedback and guidance. We need to provide level up skills, and we need to help create this awareness. And the best way to do this is really to introduce a system for evaluating the effectiveness of managers one-on-ones so that they can learn and grow. The ideal approach is some easy to use system that integrates with calendar. For example, there's this company Kairos that does this. And it basically is just this opportunity where people can evaluate their meetings. The leader can then see a dashboard, see what's working, what's not working, and then learn, reflect, and try some new things. So basically what the best organizations do is they say, okay, our people are making this incredible investment in an activity that could truly be transformative. Well, given this investment, let's make sure that we've integrated a system, to provide this feedback to their managers. And interestingly, we do this all the time with regard to like engagement surveys, right? Engagement surveys are designed to, capture the employee experience and then provide a dashboard of feedback. But interestingly, engagement surveys, they don't have content around meetings, and they certainly don't have content around one-on-ones. So that's why we kind of need a different plugin. But if we can start promoting this feedback loop to create self-awareness, if we can start leveling up skills, if we can get people to start reading my book, when it, as it comes out, so managers just realize that this is such a unique and special possibility for them when executed effectively. All these things together can change the broader ecosystem and, be almost competitive advantage for an organization.
So managers are the ones who are facilitating these meetings. And I suppose one-on-ones are only as purposeful as the managers make them. So I'm wondering what team members, what the directs can do to advocate for better one-on-ones. Do you have advice for them?
So obviously individuals can advocate for themselves to meet with their manager. So let's assume that the manager is doing them, but they're just not really panning out so well. What I would probably say that is critical for the direct is to make sure that they really know what they need from this one-on-one. We can't get what we need unless we know what we need. So reflection before the one-on-one is critical. Like, okay, I really need this from this meeting. And then they could articulate some questions that provides them with the opportunities to get that information. So knowing what they need is really important. Also, not being afraid to seek help. But seeking help is obviously crucial when taking on new challenges or confronting obstacles, what have you. Social psychologists generally have found that there's two types of help-seeking behavior. There's autonomous help-seeking and dependent help-seeking. Dependent help-seeking is just when you ask your manager to give you the answer. And to no surprise, employees who do dependent help-seeking are actually lower performers. Those individuals who engage in more autonomous help-seeking, right? You're trying to have your manager work with you. You're trying to acquire what you need to solve the problem. Those employees are generally the highest performers. So asking for help is critical. Asking for help successfully is critical. So those are two pieces that the employee, controls. And then there's a variety of other things. I spend quite a bit of the content of the book really getting into the employee perspective, because after all, it takes two to tango. And so while the onus is on the manager, the direct can still shape it, right? They can shape it, but they need to shape it by knowing what they need. They need to shape it by not getting too emotional or defensive. They need to shape it by disclosing, right? Because if they don't disclose, not much can come from it.
Yeah. So the managers may actually set the course, but the employee has to feel empowered to set the terms, at least as a partner in that process.
That's right. So the manager, when they roll this out or they do a reboot of their one-on-ones, they need to really communicate why they're doing it. And they need to tie it to values. They can tie it to their own personal values, as well as the values of the organization. In fact, I have a chapter in the book where I take all these organizational vision statements and show how one-on-ones are the mechanism for driving so much of what we talk about in organizational vision. And so, people get skeptical when a new initiative is rolled out, but if it's tied to values, it's not resisted the same way. And so if a manager says, listen, it's really important to me to promote thriving. It's really important to me that you're engaged, that this job is meaningful. And one-on-ones are that mechanism where I can check in with you to make sure that these things are happening. And this is going to be your meeting. And so that type of communication can really help set the stage. And then they'll need to reify that communication occasionally at the start of a meeting. But ultimately, it's going to come down to their track record, right? So if you establish a track record of great listening, following through on the actions you committed to, each one-on-one, you might check in to ask, hey, how'd that go? I know we talked about this, so that the employee sees that you're taking this seriously. And even a silly thing is note-taking. These managers that literally take notes, and old school note-taking appears to be the most welcome, where you're just jotting it down in a journal book. These things just all signal to your people that, wow, my manager actually cares.
The book is Glad We Met, and the author, and I'm glad we met
Thank
for
you.
this conversation, is Stephen Rogelberg. Stephen, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
It was so much fun. I love how you do this. I love the format. It's really great. So I really appreciate you doing this, and I appreciate getting out this content to your folks. I hope people find, glad we met, the art and science of one-on-one meetings intriguing.